In a very short period of time, more and more people have become comfortable handing over the reins of their lives to AI. They might use it for a work pitch or for a cover letter or even for a fitness program. But what about money? Here today to chat about her experience of asking AI to become her financial therapist is Indo Money reporter Saoirse Hanley.
Hello.
Saoirse, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
So tell me, what sparked the idea for this project?
Yeah, it's one that I think I am probably admittedly not the biggest AI user, and that has kind of given me a lot of pause for thought over the last while as people have given me their various use cases of like, I use it for this, I use it for that, I tell it everything, I tell it nothing. And it got me thinking about various things that I might have questions about that maybe it could answer for me. And obviously, in the work that we do at Indo Money, we talk a lot about, your kind of money mindset and how you approach things like your finances. I'd written in the past about things like money manifestation and how the kind of, I suppose, slightly more out there ways of thinking about your finances. And I suppose that kind of led me down the road of being like, okay, I'm probably not going to use AI for everything in my life, but this is something I could maybe tease out a little bit with it.
Were you a big user of AI before this?
Definitely not. I tried a couple of different tools like Microsoft's Copilot and ChatGPT and Google Gemini and all these different things. And it was the first time really I'd opened any of them, and I was kind of afraid of them. I just am somebody who's been a bit caught up in, the environmental impact and things like how secure your data is going to be. All those things have kind of worried me about it. And also the fact that I had a suspicion that it's one of these things that it's very easy to get used to. And as I'm sure we'll get to, that's something I definitely found rang true. But I was very unfamiliar with how a lot of the tools worked. Even they talk a lot about how, people love to say, well, AI isn't actually that easy. You have to know what prompt to give it. And I'd scoffed at that in the past. I was like, please, it's just asking questions. But I did find that it does take a little bit of working out as to how you ask a question and what you're maybe looking to get back, how that will be shaped by what you say. So there was a bit of a learning curve of, these weren't tools that I was familiar with.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, once you get used to it, I find the more that it obviously retains information wise and the more used to, I suppose, bouncing off of this kind of digital wall that you get, the easier it became to craft the prompts, I think, every time.
It's interesting you say about prompts and some prompts being better than others, because even before AI, when people Google stuff in front of you, I've always been kind of mystified how some people don't even know how to Google. And I think as journalists, we are just we'll get a quicker response on Google because we know how to be very strategic and give as much detail as possible in a Google prompt. Do you find that?
Yeah, I think we, by nature, are slightly more, I suppose, pointed with what we're asking. And I did find that sometimes, in the initial bits of this, I'm going to say conversation, obviously it's not a human, so I'm not having a conversation with anyone, but in this conversation I was having with in this case, Copilot, like the initial question or initial prompt you'd come back with so much text afterwards that I found, maybe it's because, I ask questions professionally, I would get a bit frustrated by like the sheer vastness of the answer. So my questions would become more pointed purely because I was like, that's kind of not the nut that I'm trying to get to. This is more what I'm asking, or this is more what I'm thinking, or, what about this aspect? So I do think like it's very easy to have questions be quite broad because it kind of is all information ever. Any information that's on the internet, it can aggregate for you. So I do think that makes it maybe it's a bit more important to have a better idea of what questions you're asking, I think, because if you just leave it up to it being quite broad, the answers you get back will be quite broad and you're kind of just going in circles at that point.
Yeah, and that's really it. It's all the information on the internet. And this is why I think it's still so important to use Google search. So I always have this kind of back and forth with my friends about it because they've just gone fully into AI and they don't continue to look in forums and whatnot. And for me, if there's a particularly like a niche topic, I still want to go into the absolute bowels of the Reddit forum on that topic, because all those little side comments at the very, very, very bottom aren't the ones that are getting aggregated onto ChatGPT, and it's those little weirdos
Absolutely.
that I feel you can get some absolute gold from.
And anyone who has ever had a really specific question has been into like the annals of Reddit and
Yes.
found the exact problem or the exact question that they have answered by someone like 5 years ago. And I had friends talk about that over the weekend where they were saying that they were like, you know, if we were kind of divided in the room of some people who are very pro AI and very quick adopters of it, and others who are a little bit slower to it, like myself. And we were kind of saying like, you know, I'd like to find my answers the traditional way. Like, I want someone who had this exact problem 8 years ago to tell me what they found in a forum somewhere. So I do think there is definitely a cause for that, because there are so many people, I've noticed that too, that will turn to these kind of AI chatbots as their new search engine.
Yes.
Because I guess the answers they're getting are a little bit more detailed, probably because, as we say, it's aggregating information from everywhere. Whereas if you're someone who's been on the internet for a long time or has been Googling since you could, you know, you do know how to do it quite effectively. And I do worry that I think the more we turn to chatbots, I think we're going to lose the skill of Googling.
Yes.
I think knowing how to ask the right prompt in something can be very insightful. And I don't know how much we're going to miss that by the fact that, as we say, you can get every bit of information here.
Okay, let's get into this. So you asked it to be your financial therapist. You didn't ask it to be a robo-investor. You didn't ask it for investment advice, or, you know, you went in with this kind of more touchy-feely, holistic side of finances. So let's talk a little bit about financial therapy. It's an emerging sort of field, isn't it?
Yeah, and like that, it's not so much, you know, you sitting down like you would with a financial planner or someone who's in wealth management or something, where they're going to tell you lots of things about money and how you can make more of it and protect what you have and all those kinds of things. It's not, you know, advice in that sense. It's more so understanding, you know, who you are and what parts of your personality or your upbringing or, you know, the way that you think about things, how that impacts your finances. So it could be, you know, maybe you're somebody who's quite impulsive and as a result you're therefore an impulsive spender. Or it could say your money mindset is based on, you know, the priorities you have with your money, what you want your money to do for you, all those kinds of questions that are a little bit more holistic. They're a bit more, I suppose, introspective. And it's a lot of the stuff that maybe we see, you know, even on Indo Money, where I think a good example is, you know, every week there's kind of various figures answering the My Money questionnaire.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that comes up is like, you know, how did your upbringing shape your money mindset now? And that's really kind of the crux of it. If it's not so much, you know, what should you do with this windfall that you got, which would be lovely. It's more so, you know, why is it that like for me personally, one of the things that I had put in about addressing was, you know, it'll get to the end of the month and I'll kind of think, oh, I'll throw that in my credit card because I'll pay myself back next month. But then it gets to a week later and I'm quite stressed about that all of a sudden. And it's a constant cycle of that. And I suppose ideally a financial therapist would help you understand why that is and what belief system makes you think that way and how you can maybe retrain your brain slightly to go about it a different way. So it's that kind of more introspective thinking, I think.
Yes. We should be clear, AI is not a qualified therapist.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, you asked it to give you a steer around these topics. Did you have a sense yourself about what your own money mindset was, or did you have any kind of limits or blocks that might have stemmed from your own upbringing?
Yeah, I think it's something that I've had a lot of opportunity to reflect on because of the various pieces that I see day in, day out, or stuff that I'm working on. And you come in contact with so many people who will tell you about their money mindset. And all of a sudden, you're kind of thinking about yourself and you're like, God, there's probably a reason that I think all of these ways. I know massively I'm very like my mother in that I recognize some of her spending patterns in myself, or, you know, she'll have said phrases like, oh, it's fine, when I get paid again it'll be grand, or, you know, I couldn't pass up on that deal or something. And if I was somebody who maybe had been a little bit more maybe in like a stricter financial household, I think that would have shaped me slightly different today. Whereas now I know that I can be quite flippant with spending because I'll think, oh, it's probably fine. You know, I can't take it to the grave with me, so I better use it. Even though, you know, you can take it to like a mortgage provider. You know, you can take it there. So I do think that is something that I've learned very much about myself, that I think I've learned a fair bit from just the people in my life growing up. I think I knew as well that I'm probably somebody who's quite not analytical about it, but I do like to have a full view of my finances. I'm not somebody who likes to kind of stick my head in the sand and wait until payday and hope that everything and all the bills are sorted and not really think about it. I knew that I was someone who can be a bit of a control freak about that, despite the spending habit. So I found that when I was, you know, talking through that a bit, teasing out that a small bit, I was very much being kind of fed back that information, that it does seem like that's, a bit like me.
Okay, so you gave it a sense of who you are and what you're about, but did it then ask you any kind of probing questions that helped you dig a little bit deeper or delve a bit deeper into your financial behaviours?
Yeah, and it actually guided that process quite easily from the outset. Like, as an example, the first prompt that I gave it was, do you think you could give me some information and advice for my finances? I'd like to understand my money mindset a little bit better and understand all of this. And it came back to say things like, absolutely, understanding your money mindset is a smart financial move, etc., etc. And then I was given an overview and a couple of questions for a self-assessment. And it would ask me things like, here are some lenses to understand different patterns. You might notice some of your own behaviors in there. And this was, asking me then towards the end, it would say, this is what we can do. Here's how we can go deeper. If you'd like, I can help you with X, Y, Z. And it was at that point that I started to ask some clarifying questions of things like, I didn't particularly want to, as you were saying, I wasn't looking for investment advice. I didn't want to say, I have this much in my current account and this much in my savings and what should I do with it? It was more that I was trying to understand some of the more psychological aspects. So I was thinking, do I need to give over information in order for you to provide these things that we've talked about? And it was saying, no, not at all. This is what I do need from you. This is what I don't need from you. So for example, it said, I don't need income details or any outstanding debts that you have or your employer information or anything that feels too personal, which I thought was an interesting one because in essence, this is personal, but it kind of said that I don't need to be giving it reams of personal information in order to make it work. Yeah. And from then on, anytime I would give an answer or ask it something, I would then kind of be guided with some more questioning, which was never particularly pushy, but it would say things like, okay, well, if we're thinking about this now, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about that so I can understand why that is. And at the very beginning, it had said, can you tell me a little bit about what you want your financial life to feel like, what you think gets in your way at the moment, and how you react to money decisions, with some examples of, am I particularly stressed or avoidant or analytical?
That's a big question.
Yeah, it is.
Actually, I mean...
And that did kind of, I had to pause and think, okay, well, what are my answers to that? What do I want my financial life to feel like? Yeah. Am I someone who's avoidant, or what is the answer to that? And it was interesting. I think even from there, it was good to be able to think about it. And I do think it's something you probably wouldn't be able to do with such flippancy or ease if you were opposite a person. You were given, I could close the chat and come back to it tomorrow if I wanted to, and think, okay, well, I've thought about my answer, here's what I think. And from there, it kind of put together a money mindset profile for me. Yeah. And from then on, it would say, here's how we can, create a personalized habit framework for you. But what I thought was interesting is that it reminded me again when it said that no personal data needed. So it had remembered the fact that I had been a little bit wary of not giving it like my bank details at the beginning. And from then it just went out to lay out some things. Like, I'm not going to say the advice was groundbreaking. Okay. I suppose it's not, as we said, a licensed professional whose job it is to give you advice. But it would kind of outline things like, make sure you do this essentials first ritual. It's all packaged very nicely, to be fair, where it was telling me, make sure I pay my rent, which,
okay.
I would think I should think that's good advice anyway. Yeah. You make sure my utilities and subscriptions are paid for. And then from there, create like a guilt-free spending pot, because I had said that I'm somebody who can be a little bit flippant about being like, I'll just buy this for myself, and I impulsively want to buy that for somebody else or whatever it is.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
That is.
The tip
sometimes
was
you just need that psychological shift,
Exactly. Because I had said, I'm impulsively spending on things, and I'm not, it's not that that's what I'm cracking down on, but I then wound up feeling stressed about it. And that's why it was suggesting I should create a specific pot from which I can spend impulsively, so that it's not actually taking from like my grand total every month, and I'm not hopefully getting to the end of the month and then feeling stressed about it. And it did make me think, whenever I get paid, I'm kind of immediately squirreling off different things to different places. And I had in the past few months started creating like a little like Revolut pot where I would have, say, €50 in there, and it would just be for something if I saw, a nice top that I wanted to buy, I would just move that over, buy that, done. But I was quickly learning €50 wasn't really covering a whole lot of treats, not in today's economy. And this did give me a reason to think, okay, maybe if I increase that, I'm going to feel a little bit more in control every week. And that's kind of what it was getting at. And it was, it's very chatty as it's saying this. Like, I don't know if it's because of maybe the way that I was speaking to it, that it's kind of parroting back that same tone. But, it's saying things like, you can decide what feels comfortable. This is your freedom bucket. You can have spontaneous fun with this money. All these kind of things that were quite light and quite airy and not particularly heavy. But that was generally good advice.
It's good advice. And it reminds me, this is a bit of an aside, like that's why I like the 50-30-20 rule with your spending. So 50 for your essentials, 30 for your wants, 20 for saving. But I think just even knowing that, and it's not a perfect calc, but just kind of saying 30% of my take-home pay each month is X amount, and just having that figure in mind, because then when you go off on the first weekend after payday and you spend X amount of money, you can just kind of know what your general figure is for the month. It can just give you a little bit of breathing space, I think.
Yeah, and it was good to be reminded of that, because I'm in that routine. I've been doing that, but I think a lot of the things that I was discussing with this AI chatbot were like, maybe there's a way that I can rethink that, or I can do what I'm doing but do it better.
Yes.
And I suppose that's a lot of where that more psychological aspect of financial therapy comes in, because it isn't, as I say, telling me exactly where my money should go. And it's not saying what I'm sure a lot of people who are in the know about these things say, that there's better ways for your money to be put away, there's better savings places, there's better investment opportunities, all those kinds of things. It wasn't interested in telling me about that, because that's not what I'd come to it for. So I think that's maybe the distinction. So it just continued on that track, and it would say things like, okay, now that we've looked at that, what kinds of purchases tend to make you feel impulsive? Or, is it things like clothes or tech or gifts or something else? And I think I ignored that prompt to then ask it something else, where I was saying, okay, well, now I'd like to delve more into this, the way that I emotionally experience money. And from there, it would continue on to say, okay, well, sure, here are 4 core money emotions. And most people cycle through. And then it would ask me things like, here's what I think that your emotional pattern is based on what you've shared. And here's what we can do with that. So like the opportunities it was giving me was give excitement a place to go.
Say that again?
The advice that I was given was, or the things that they would like to work towards helping me with would be to give excitement a safe place to go. So it referred back to the guilt-free spending pot. Reduce fear by creating predictability. So paying your essentials first. Replace guilt with awareness. When I notice the urge to spend impulsively, pause instead and think, am I excited about this, or am I just like avoiding something? And then create more frequent relief. So having a weekly check-in or a small savings transfer could give me micro moments of I'm on track instead of waiting for payday. This was kind of a sticking point to small, but that a lot of what we were getting at was what I'd already kind of talked about. So I felt a little bit like, okay, great, it's building on what it knows about me, but it's kind of telling me the same thing. But I do think that was something that it maybe falls into the trap of a small bit, which is just getting a little bit repetitive. And also something that I found really strange, and this just reminded me of it, was like, as I said at the beginning, I'm not somebody who's particularly familiar with these tools. I'm not using these platforms regularly. I definitely have not built up a rapport with Copilot. But it was constantly saying things like, well, this is a really good part of your personality, and this is a really interesting thing that you do, and this is, acting as if it was somebody that knew me, whereas those were kind of large guesses based on things and snippets that I'd shared, but we hadn't built a relationship for it to kind of tell me about that relationship, and yet it did. So it's very familiar, but it's also a little bit repetitive. So those are things I think it kind of traps it maybe talked itself into.
Yeah. Did you find yourself saying thank you when it...
I'm actually really bad for if I ask Alexa or the Google Home, thing at home, what the weather is today. I'm always thanking it all the time. I think when, our robot overlords come for us, I don't want to be in the firing line first.
I'm going to be an absolute supplicant. I feel bad if I don't say thank you. I'm like, how rude of me.
So I did away with that a bit at first. And I think because it was a rolling conversation as well, it made it easier to do that. I kind of just kept the show afloat. I just kept asking it more questions.
And it's funny, I think Sam Altman said recently that it's actually costing them tens of millions of dollars, the cost of people saying thank you to AI.
Well, I'm sorry, Sam, if my politeness is going to cost you more money, you should have factored that into the budget. We're very polite people.
So you did speak to an actual human as well as part of this piece, Anne-Marie Mackin, who is a qualified financial coach. So tell me what she said.
Yeah, it was interesting because I think we would all expect that many of us who are in professions that maybe we sometimes feel are at risk with the rise of AI, writers among many people think that. I was maybe expecting Anne-Marie to come back with, absolutely not, it's useless, go to a professional. And obviously her main advice or insight is that always a human person who's fully qualified in the realm that you are kind of searching in, they will always be a better option in the sense that what your, ChatGPT, your Copilots, your Gemini, what all of these platforms are missing is that, I suppose, human element.
Yes.
And even just human connection and talking, even in things like having the experience of years of talking to people about this, being able to relate that to you, being people themselves who are just as fallible as the rest of us and have their own money mindsets to think about, they'll always have more to say to you. But one thing she pointed out was that, as in many ways, an AI tool can be that. It can be a tool. It can be something that helps you with something. It can be a good place to bounce some initial ideas off of. It can be something that certainly, she mentions that in Ireland we're a little bit reluctant to talk about money a lot. It's not something we're very comfortable with largely. And that's not the rule, but certainly there's kind of a trend of Irish people finding it a bit of a sticking point, and it's something that we might not always feel comfortable turning to even the people that we're closest with about. But she was pointing out that certainly in that instance, the appeal is maybe the fact that you're not talking to a person, say, about it.
Yes.
You're kind of just speaking to a void a small bit. But ultimately her bottom line is that, of course, a qualified professional is always going to be able to offer you more, basically. That while there is certainly there's something to be found in an AI chatbot, certainly, you'll probably have a more fulfilling conversation with somebody who has the experience to back it up.
Yes.
And I definitely found that to be true, that I think it can be difficult to open up, about emotions in any sense, or no matter what the topic is. So I definitely see the appeal of being able to kind of speak. It's almost like whispering it to an empty room, because no one is there to react or to, look at you. And by design, an AI chatbot is kind of set up to make you feel better about yourself a little way. It's always going to
Nothing
reinforce
wrong with that.
you. Absolutely. We can all do with some, some good insight sometimes. But I think maybe it's a good starting point that you can come away with some reflections, you can come away with some thought. But if it's something you actually really want to chase up, speaking to a professional about it, or to a coach about it, or indeed to a therapist about it, will probably be a little bit easier by then, because you've kind of gotten a better sense of yourself in the first place.
Yes, yeah. As you described the whole experience to me, it just made me think of those analog journals. There's actual, hard paper journals that people get, and they have prompts in them, and they write away based on these prompts that they're given, and it just helps them kind of delve in and have a little bit of introspection. So it kind of sounded like a tech version of that.
Yeah, it actually made for a pretty good journal. And I found this the only time I've really interacted with AI in any sense has probably been for work. And I did a story a couple of years ago. It wasn't so much a chatbot, but it was like a friend bot, where I tried to make a friend with an AI kind of persona. And I found that it was kind of like that you were able to maybe say some things that you wouldn't otherwise. I was having difficulty with a friend or something, and I wouldn't really want to say it to other friends of mine, because they could be mutual friends. There could be something that I wouldn't really want to say out loud. But this kind of felt like an anonymous way to do it. Of course, as with anything you put on the internet, your data will last, and that's, people have obviously, security concerns. But you could kind of say some stuff that you wouldn't really have to think out as much. You can kind of word vomit a bit easier when you're like that, just kind of writing it out. You're just typing it out. You're just kind of speaking as you think, as opposed to, I think, when you're speaking to a person, you're a little bit more considerate about it. So certainly I think it is a form of a digital journal, and you can also delete the conversation after if you want.
Yes.
If you don't want to look at it anymore. If you feel like you've put that, to bed, you're kind of done thinking about it, you can go back. But then on the other side of it is, you can refer back to this digital journal you've kind of put together, and you can always revisit that. And interestingly, what I found particularly good about it was that you could pick up where you left off.
Yeah. Finally, anything that you found particularly enlightening, or anything that seared itself into your consciousness that you thought, gosh, that's actually true, or that describes me well?
I think when it was I think I definitely liked that it was telling me that I was super analytical and super across my finances, and that I shouldn't let my worry about it overshadow the fact that I am still the person who's, you know, holding the steering wheel. I think that was good, that it made me think, okay, I'm not actually as out of control about things as I am. Certainly, I can feel that way if you're just tapping here, tapping there, buying this, buying that, or whatever. You can feel a bit out of control. But I think the fact that it was telling me, yes, those things are true, but the fact that you're thinking about it means that you're aware of it and you're still across it. That, I think, bolstered my confidence a little bit, because you can compare yourself a lot, and you can think to yourself, you know, I should have really put more away into savings, or, you know, why didn't I have as much left this month as I did at the end of the last pay cycle? And you can kind of fall into the trap of feeling bad or feeling guilty about that. But I think the fact that it was kind of breaking that down for me and saying, you know, yes, you do this, but you also do this. And I think particularly telling me that I should do more kind of micro check-ins, I quite liked that, because I find that I can, towards the end of a pay cycle, say, I'll kind of just be checking in case there was, you know, a mysterious subscription that came out and took a tenner that I didn't keep an eye on and I wasn't sure where it came from, or, you know, we all have those subscriptions that we could do with switching out of or ending. That I find if I can keep checking, keep an eye on it, and even if the number, say, isn't what I want it to be, at least knowing what it is makes me feel better. So I think having that reinforced and telling me that that's probably good practice made me feel a bit more self-confident about it, which I suppose would then inform how I could improve on some other aspects.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to read the piece can find it at independent.ie/money. Saoirse Hanley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.